Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a good day. I've got Saul. No, John. Saul is coming in. That's why I got it confused. In fact, he might already be in as a participant, so I'll check in there. In the meantime, we've got a lot going on that I feel, John, it feels like it's brewing, right? And I'm concerned because when things brew, they then boil over pretty badly. So what's brewing? What should I be worried about?
Well, one thing that we're looking at now is, the fact that we've gone from where we have lawsuits and things that's been interested within the industry itself, brokerages and portals,
Yes.
MLSs. We've all looked at it from that perspective. What's interesting is we're now starting to see more of an interest from people outside of the industry itself. People like Congress. What we're interested in is now look at it from are there some patterns that are showing themselves from people outside of the industry, such as the regulators, the federal, the state, and there's we've been looking at some individual cases and what the impact is on those. But there's one that's most of those are going to be decided, let's say, next year. But we have one that's coming up for a decision starting next week. And so that's what I thought
Hmm.
I'd talk about first. You might have remembered a year ago, the Federal Trade Commission uh, entered into a lawsuit against Zillow and Redfin for
Yes, I remember that.
yeah, it involved kind of a pay to play. Uh, if you exit Redfin, the marketplace of advertising to rental properties, uh, I'll Zillow will pay you $100 million. It's a pay to exit. So they had this type of arrangement. Well, the Federal Trade Commission took a look at that and said, wait a minute, we don't think that that might be, an antitrust violation and illegal. So they filed suit. Well,
Mm.
interestingly enough, that suit is going to be decided next week.
Whoa.
So next week, Judge Tanger, I think his name is, in the Virginia marketplace, federal court case is going to decide what we call a bench verdict. In other words, it's going to be decided solely by the judge. Uh, he's going to hear the arguments and make a decision. And one of the decisions could lead to something like a consent decree. And it could
Oh.
have an impact that's going to affect other players in the business. So this is going to be the major one that I'm going to follow. And of course, interesting, these bench trials generally only take about a week or so. So
So why?
this could be something that we actually can report in our next session here
So why
on the
would something
update.
like this be important for us to follow and see if and see how it affects our industry?
Yeah, because we're always concerned about when does it get to the point where it's affecting the agent
Yeah.
in the field, and it'll take a while to get down to them. It's like we had with the Sitzer case, right? And the major case that we're still adapting our practices with, and this is going to be one in which there could be some structural changes made that could affect some type of a consent decree that could have an impact on how the practices will be handled, by the agents. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, it could. could get to that point. But the interesting thing to me is finally we're going to have a uh, a ruling that could be pretty definitive, especially if they make some structural changes that impact how other people in the industry will react, such as how will the portals react, how will the MLSs react.
Does this, and then I'll go to Saul on this one.
Wait,
I
got
got you, brother. Let me I'll remove you on that one. Okay, perfect. I'll go to Saul right after on this one specifically, John. When we're looking at this ruling that happens, do you think that this affects anything having to do with Compass, MRED, and Zillow then? Because that seems to be the one that is involving Congress. It's the one that's grabbing the headlines. And that I think is the one that could become super dangerous for our industry because of that. Does that affect us in any way in that situation?
Yeah, I think it could have an effect on that, especially if they come up with some type of a consent decree, and they will be part of the whole process of the outside interest affecting all of the players in the industry that will trickle down to the agent as to how they can practice. And so this is actually what we're looking at in the crossroads. Is there a
Mm.
pattern here, which is going to have a significant impact on the various players?
I wasn't
And
paying attention to that one, John. Now I have to
no,
pay
yeah,
attention to it.
I wasn't either until I went and did a little research about an update, and I said, "Well, wait a minute. You mean you're actually going to have a judge making a decision, and part of that decision could be in how the judge is going to decide whether or not it's going to be under a rule of reason or as a matter of law." And remember, back in the Sitzer case, that was a major thing. The judge ruled that the practice itself was illegal, and therefore the only thing they had to look at in Setzer was the amount of the money damages, and
Got it.
that could set another precedent. So
Okay. All right.
I know Saul's been looking at these patterns, and here's one impacts the outside interest.
yeah, I want to attack Tristan's question directly, right? So,
Yeah.
so this is a separate case, so there's no direct tie between the case you mentioned, which is this Zillow, which is Compass,
MRED, Zillow.
Zillow, MRED, where
Congress now. Yeah.
yeah, where we're talking about MLSs with establishing private networks, withholding their listings from a portal, the portal passing rules and excluding certain listings from the portal, right? So that's a big case. And you're right. First, we saw, and remember, this context that John and I are playing with is revolves around litigation, regulation, innovation, consolidation. Remember, we got these five pieces. So litigation and regulation and possibly consolidation. So when we looked at this case with Zillow and MRED and private listing networks, that case, then all of a sudden we saw, and it's not all of a sudden, right? We saw from the Judiciary Committee of the House of Representatives, where they said, hey, wait a minute, Rebecca Jensen, CEO of MRED and CEO of the other party. We want to hear from the CEOs why you're excluding Compass, Robert Refkin, why you're excluding right listings or you're trying to exclude listings. So Congress sent a letter and I haven't
Yep.
seen the result of that. Then we heard that the NAACP, I think it was, they sent a letter that revolved around this issue everybody's been talking about, which is fair housing, potential fair housing issues
Yep.
around this.
Got that.
Then Elizabeth Warren, Senator Elizabeth Warren, then she
Reach out.
jumped in. And so John and I put an article together recently. It's like the three strikes and you're out thing. And it's like now, and then the states are looking at this. So that's the case you're talking about, Tristan, and that's one we have to follow. And this other case could, the results of it could have some kind of play on the way people are thinking about other cases. But what you've got is regulation. You got the Federal
Yeah.
Trade Commission jumping in. Okay,
Dude,
so
I think
these
that's the
patterns
biggest.
like to establish, right? That's visible and was visible back in 2008. And who are the parties that are involved when this happens? Well, typically you'll get the FTC and or the DOJ and or it starts somewhere. It usually starts with a hearing. The Consumer Federation of America gets involved. And so uh, we did have a major decision 2 years ago that changed the whole structure of real estate. It was the Sitzer case. That didn't come out of
Hmm.
nowhere. That
No.
came out of the same sorts of issues and presentations and questioning that got us to the Sitzer case, which includes the consent decree, includes the hearing at the conclusion of the consent decree in 2018 by the FTC and the Consumer
Mhm.
Federation of America, which brought up these issues that resulted in a major change for people that
Yeah,
affected everybody
also,
on the street.
well, Saul, I think part of what you're also getting to is that I think it also affected where we're at now with Compass, MRED, and Zillow because a lot of the whole process with NAR and the situation and how they handled it really made them look inadequate in a lot of different places. And so then you add the private listing network situation on top of that. And then it gives someone like Compass the ability to be like, well, we're doing our own thing and we're going to fight against you, because you guys are just not doing it the way that it's supposed to be done, right? So it's like layers. And now what I'm watching happening, which is what I'm concerned about, I feel like we opened the door to more regulation. It's like, wait a second, guys, we're going the wrong way. Like 5 years from now, the government's going to be telling us how to run our business and what commission we should or shouldn't charge. Like, what's happening?
Well, it's interesting because John and I said 30 years ago, and we'll say it again today, the way you practice real estate today is not going to be the way you practice real estate 5 years from now. The way
Dude.
you practice real estate 5 years ago is not the way you practice real estate today. And the
Yeah.
way you practice real estate today is not going to be the way you practice real estate 5 years from now. In this particular case,
Yeah.
Zillow was and Redfin, there was an exchange of money here, wasn't there? Where they were
Yeah.
buying the market in an already confined market. So in this consolidation and the FTC, that's regulation. Matter of fact, they're the cops, aren't they? Where the DOJ is the prosecutor and the FTC, they're the cops at the federal
Yeah.
level.
I remember.
They've
Yeah,
jumped
we
in and
talked
they've said,
about this earlier.
yeah, they're
Sure.
suing. They said, hey, we're suing these companies because we think they're violating the antitrust laws. This isn't even a private citizen or a business. This is the Federal Trade Commission. This is the police that are super powerful, and they're saying, we believe you violated the antitrust laws, and you've done this because you bought part of the market, and this can have an effect on future consolidations or potential future. And remember, the Compass thing you're talking about, that kind of grew out of a lot of consolidation, didn't it? Right. So it's these key pieces that we keep talking about.
So, where do you think, based on what you're seeing brewing, because I think this is where our concern should be. By the way, Saul, what car wash is that in the back?
That's my car wash.
Where? Where is this?
It's on the corner of 33rd and Adams Avenue in San Diego. I bought it in 1979, along with the two houses next to it. So I've owned it for a long time.
Dude, that was a
As
nice
a
Hey,
matter of
house.
fact, if you look behind me, look over my shoulder
Wait,
there.
there's John Riley when he
That
was
is John Reilly.
42.
That's him.
I was pumping gas.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
This
Uh,
is actually a car is a side trip. That car wash is a lesson. When I bought that car wash with two of my high school buddies and another friend, there's a young real estate broker, and we thought that we were going to buy this car wash and someday we would tear it down and build an apartment building.
oh, that's a good idea.
That's what we thought. There's no way an apartment building would make as much money as this car wash makes now, 35, 40 years later. So we had the right idea. We bought it, but we bought it for the wrong idea, but it doesn't matter, right?
It's true. It's
You,
true. It's true.
back to this case with the Federal Trade Commission. It seems that we're at a point in which, as it goes to how much consolidation and concentration will regulators tolerate in the real estate information marketplace? That's the
That's true.
ultimate question, I think, that runs through all of these individual cases. Are we at a point where, the feds are going to say, hey, we've tolerated this long enough. We're just going to step in here and do some type of structural changing that could then have an impact right down the line to everybody, and eventually, of course, to the agents. So, are they at the point of toleration? If this judge comes back and rules in the case that uh, we don't even have to decide whether or not this is legal or not, we're going to presume that this was an illegal antitrust, in which case that's what happened in the Sitzer case. It
Hmm.
was presumed, and so it was very difficult to defend it. It was a They went into the case, and it was presumed because the judge made the decision, and that's what's going to happen here in a couple of weeks. We'll find out whether or not this judge also decided to say it's per se illegal. It's not under what they call the rule of reason.
How does that, if that goes in the direction where we could have a situation that it changes the MLSs and how agents function, how does that affect the situation with Compass, MRED, and Zillow? Does it or does it not?
Well, it could. There could be a decision that says you can or cannot keep your listings from a portal, or you can or you cannot, if you're a portal, decide which listings you're going to put on your portal and which ones you're not going to put on your portal, right? So we
Got
don't
it.
know which way that's going to go, but right, that's the whole MRED Zillow Compass
That's it.
deal right now,
Yeah.
right? And we're
So if they
waiting
come in and
for
they
that.
say, hey, so you can't keep properties off, sorry, then that directly then goes against the whole situation that we're going against with Compass and Emerald and every other MLS that wants to do it that way. So then that means the government gets involved more because they can be like, You know what? We agree with that. You can't." And then what else can they tell us what to do or not to do? That's my concern. Even though I want all properties in the MLS, that's what I want.
Yeah, so that's always a challenge, right? What does the government constitutionally have the right to tell you you can and can't do? And we know, and we can take that to extremes, and the government has taken that to extremes, right? But when you look at the world of MLS, MLS was established as a business to business network, broker to broker, business to business. It was not open to the consumer. Consumers didn't have access to the MLS. Matter of fact, we protected it. And we used to have books, and the books would say confidential. And you weren't allowed to give that book to anybody because the only people that could look in the book were people who were members of this cooperative, this broker. It was a business to business network. Well, in the 90s, we started to change the public perception of information about properties that are available. And we started up with a number of portals, homes.com, realtor.com, home advisor, which was Microsoft. And we started to put our inventory on the internet. And over time, and then the second generation portals came along, Zillow and Trulia, and we started to build consumer expectation that buyers are entitled to transparency. Right? That was we built that. We made that happen through the portals. We gave our listings to the portals, and then the portals just started marketing and doing all the things they did to get traffic. And now everybody has this feel. A lot of people believe that consumers have the right to see everything. That's why if you try to keep your listings off of a portal, you'll get pushback because people will say to you, but the buyer has the right to see everything. Well, that wasn't the way it used to be. But that's the expectation we're at now, I think. You're on mute.
I think you're muted, Tristan.
I expect to see everything. I'm saying, why are people holding things back from me? I want to see it
Yeah.
all.
Well, so you could, back in the day, you could through the MLS.
Yeah.
You paid for the
Interesting.
MLS. It was a structure that you bought a subscription to. Consumers
Hmm.
didn't buy a subscription to the MLS. And so you
Hmm.
could, if you were a real estate practitioner, you could see what the inventory was. That's the way it
Got
was.
it.
But now everybody assumes that the buyer should be entitled to see
Hmm.
everything. Although some brokers are saying, well, we think maybe they are not, right? We're going to hold
Yeah.
it back. And that's why, so there's this argument going on as to who's entitled to what. So that, let's say the buyer's perspective, I'm entitled to see everything. But what about the seller who might say, but if you see everything, that might take away from my negotiating power. If you had the ability to see this property has been on the market for 3 years and it hasn't sold, you might give me a lowball offer, right?
Yeah,
So
but
there's
then you're not playing. I think that's when you're not playing with all your cards on the table from both sides, right? So that's interesting. I
well, and
have one
that's the
question.
question. Does there have to be, does everybody's cards, and I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, is there somehow some requirement that if you're negotiating for a private asset, everybody's got to
Mm,
put their cards on the table? That's not the way it ever used to be.
yeah. Well, I think we're going backwards, but maybe that's where we end up for a little bit before we go back to the other place. I don't know, but here's my question in closing here, because we've got two minutes. What should we watch out for in the next few weeks or month that could change the trajectory of where the industry goes?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any one thing that's going to change the way that people practice real estate between now and the end of the year,
Oh, cool.
right? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't watch things, and that doesn't
Yeah,
mean
well, I know that. Just
that doesn't mean that knowing about these cases that we talk about might not give you an it might give you an edge
it does
because
give you an edge. Clients
knowledge
clients
is power.
watch.
Just watch and be able to talk about it because this will eventually get to the consumer. They'll read about it, they hear about it, they'll have questions about it, and the
They
agent
already
that can
do.
talk about it has an advantage over the agent that can't talk about it.
I
You
like
know, I
that.
might,
John, what about you?
well, I might just add that in addition to the Federal Trade Commission, there were five state attorney generals that are also plaintiffs. So now it's not only the feds, we're talking about states coming up with their attorney generals, seeing that there's a flavor of maybe some antitrust that they're investigating. So there are a lot of people looking at this, and I'm going to be really interested in what happens 2 weeks from now when the decision is made in this particular bench trial.
That's going to be crazy. It gives us time to see what happens and talk about it on our next update. John, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you have a really nice background the next time you show up with trees and ocean, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Saul's always surprising us with his next background. That's a really cool story, though, man. I like that
That,
one.
that is John Reilly standing behind me there.
Yeah.
I was just joking. I'm surprised that was
No,
actually
no,
him.
That's really
that's true.
John.
Oh, that's funny. Everyone else, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 weeks. It's the
Yep.
update.
Take
Bye,
care.
guys.
Bye bye.